up on your question, science and faith, is it a bad marriage? Well, my whole point is that mimetic theory makes available the idea that it's a good marriage. So the question is evolution and belief. Girard has a book called Evolution and Conversion. So there's your evolution science portion, and the conversion, your religious portion. And it answers the question that you find on the website, which is excellent, by the way, for the prep. It's a whole curriculum for Darwin studies. The quote is, Sarah Litter being interviewed, and being asked, as Americans were having the same conversation, can you believe in God and in evolution? What kind of proofs count and how much is enough? And Girard, years ago, has an answer to that. He says, belief in God within a traditional epistemology, which is to say, how do we know what we know? Considers things as real and sees God as the guarantor of that reality. He says, I don't see why God could not be compatible with science. If one believes in God, one also believes in objectivity. God is the guarantor, you see, of that objectivity. The world out there really is real, and it's not out there to get us. It's out there, and it's true. A traditional belief in God, he says, makes one a believer in the objectivity of the world. Can we go to the next slide? And so we have these two authors. The author of The Origin of Species and the author of this book called The Origin of Culture, which is, the French version is called Evolution and Conversion. I'm going to talk about the natural science that we owe to Darwin and the human science, which we owe to René Girard as a mimetic anthropology. I'm just flashing these images of things that people feel are opposed, but they're not. Evolution is not the enemy of conversion and vice versa, please. Here's Darwin on the left, the famous tree of life, and we'll see some more images. And mimetic desire on the right. The thing that they have in common, with all great thinkers, is they have one idea, one big idea. There's a famous Greek aphorism. The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one thing. And they're Einstein, Darwin, Galileo, Newton, this is some one big idea that you can read about in the essay that's online. And Darwin's one thing is simply natural selection. That is to say, if you look at the image, you see a species emerging, and then it branches out. It branches out according to variations, some of which are more adaptive than others, and therefore encourage the survival. With Girard, what you have is mimetic desire, which is to say, we don't know what to desire. We need models. When we think about it a little bit, that becomes transparent. So that the green circle requires a model, a peer, or a parent, or a teacher, in order to desire that object, that square, to begin with. So keep in mind this image of, next slide please, of the triangle and the tree of life. These are images which are hosts to the one central idea of both great thinkers. Science, here's another expression. Science always seeks elegant solutions. That is to say, with a minimal amount of parts. E equals mc squared. E basta. You don't need more than that, and you get relativity. And I won't explain that, but we're familiar with these ideas. And so I have a quote from natural selection from Darwin, from The Origin of Species. And he says, as many more individuals of each species are born than can possibly survive. Think about it. They can't all survive. There isn't room on the planet. And consequently, there is a frequently recurring struggle for existence. It follows that, and the ratiocination in Darwin is totally admirable. The care and logic and clarity of his prose. It follows that any being, if it vary however slightly, in any manner profitable to itself, under the complex and sometimes varying conditions of life, any being will have a better chance of surviving, and thus be naturally selected. Typo. Naturally, not naturally. So there you have natural selection with Darwin. Two quotes about mimetic theory, about mimetic activity, mimetic desire. I'll just quote the one. It's very famous. And it's Thomas Hobbes who wrote about social organization. And he says, If therefore any two men desire the same thing, which nevertheless they cannot both enjoy, look at the picture, they become enemies. And in the way to their end, which principally by their own conservation or sometimes delectation, that is to say, their end being merely survival or their pleasure, they endeavor to destroy or subdue one another. That's mimetic theory 101, and it strides through everything that Girard reports on in a way that natural selection strides through everything that evolutionary biology examines. And again, that image speaks for itself. Please. Let's go back to Darwin, because this issue of faith and science has been muddied. And there's a wonderful essay in a recent issue of Contagion which clarifies it. There is such a thing as wonder. In Plato's dialogues, wonder, thaumaza in Greek, is the origin of philosophy. You wonder about things, and you look for answers, and you talk with people, and you try to find answers. And there we have philosophy where that happens. On the other hand, there's such a thing as astonishment, as awe. And there we get to religion. We get to Jerusalem. That is to say, the Hebrew Bible begins with creation. And the point about creation, the simple fact that there is something rather than nothing. There's no philosophical answer for that. Why is there something rather than nothing? The simple fact that creation is given. We're born into it. We didn't make it. We didn't start it. That creation is a gift. That it's a gift from nothing, ex nihilo. That it's free for nothing, as we say, right? And to paraphrase Darwin, and numerous Psalms, what a creation. Here's Darwin. I quote, "Here first I saw a tropical forest in all its sublime splendor. I never experienced such intense delight." That's not philosophy talking. That is a religious sentiment. I quote, "I have been wandering by myself in a Brazilian forest amongst the multitude. It is hard to say what set of objects are most striking. The general luxuriance of the vegetation bears the victory, and the elegance of the grasses, the novelty of the parasitical plants, the beauty of the flowers." You see, this is a religious emotion. You don't have to believe in God to have that experience, but it is a religious experience of creation as given to us, free for nothing. Thank you. So you get Darwin evolutionary, and these are Google images of the tree of life, and they're wonderful to stroll through, and you see how many different models, but they're all emanating, you can examine them, they all come from one thing at the beginning. Next slide, please. They're a very simple schema, such as this very schematic tree of life, and the next one, please, or this very, very elaborate one. Way down on the left-hand corner, you see humans and Neanderthals, because in fact we grew up side by side. And humans and Neanderthals went extinct, but we have Neanderthal DNA, if you've been following the press about these things. And that isn't just a pretty picture, those are all the branchings of evolution. And so you have basically these two models, the branching out of species variations, which ultimately generate new species. So you go from fish to fowl to mammals, etc., and we finally get to us. Next slide, please. So, here I've just shown you some models of evolutionary biology, of Darwinian thinking. Here's a model of human being. And we have this idea of this independent self. That we are this skin-bound organism, and we are totally autonomous, and we own ourselves, and we owe nobody anything. Which, if it were true, we never would have got here. But we do perpetuate, particularly in this country, that myth. And so on the left, on your left, you have the New Yorker blowing that to pieces. By the way, everything you need to know about life and your own life center sooner or later will turn up in a New Yorker cartoon. I owe them a great deal. The reality is not that individuality, self-sufficiency. You see those arrows, they're referring to the fact that people have a hold on us. People are yanking our chain, as we say, and we. So actually, I don't have to count. You see double that image, and you see this interaction. We are interaction beings. We are not individuals. We are, as Girard says, interindividuals. And the myth of self-sufficiency is something that generates an oppositional antagonist, me against the others. And we'll see how that plays out in various ways. Please. Now, you see this. This is just going back to that earlier image, and it's very interesting because, of course, what's going on there? This might not, watch out, Mom. This might not end well. And often it doesn't, and anybody who's been around small children know that. So let's look at the next image, please. And we'll see how bad it can get. We'll see how bad it can get. And the humor is a great revealer of truth because we hold out for things adamantly against other people. And pretty soon it's really not about the things at all. It's about the other people. And the genius of this illustration is quite simply that this is the basic mimetic theory. If we do think the same thing, 1 and 1 equals 2. But if we desire the same thing, 1 and 1 equals 1. That is to say, look at this picture. You have the man, his square is black, her square, white, hers is black. But you see, they're simply reversed mirror images, mimetic images of each other. He holds out for white because she holds out for black. What are they talking about? No thing. They can be arguing about anything. But sooner or later, these arguments become just about argument. For instance, you can imagine arguing over who started it. No, you started it. No, you started it, etc., etc., etc. This is the conflict to which mimetic behavior often leads. We saw an early incident in childhood, and a parent's job is to protect children, from these conflicts, remove them from harm, doing harm to one another and to themselves. Next slide, please. So, the theory of religion, because that's what mimetic theory is. It is a scientific theory of religion. It is not a religious theory. It is a theory about religion being adaptative for the human species. Because we are the most mimetic of all animals. That's a line from Aristotle, but the fact is brain science proves it. We have mirror neurons, amazing things, that we share with some few simian species. Mirror neurons mean that when I watch somebody doing something, the same neurons fire in my brain even though I'm just observing. We are mimetic beings, and this is what can lead to a lot of trouble. If everybody is fighting against everyone else for something, and pretty soon they're just fighting and they forgot what they're fighting out. You have what Hobbes calls the war of all against all. That is to say, you have no possibility of structure, of collaboration, of community. And you have a cultural meltdown. And by the way, if we look around the world today, we still see this sort of thing going on in parts of the world where cultures are imploding. And it's not clear what they're fighting about anymore because they're in the process of destroying their own resources. Here we have the illustration, the basic model. I showed you a triangle. Remember, every triangle is a segment of a circle. You don't have a triangle. The triangle is a virtual part of a circle. Every circle is a center and a circumference, and you section the circle and you get triangles. And here you have an image, thanks to my nephew, who teaches mimetic theory at Catholic University of America. I'll give him a shout out. His name is Stephen McKenna. Look him up. You have everybody fighting. And there can't be any, because sooner or later, some are going to be dead, some are going to be wounded, some are going to go off to save their skin, but you won't have cooperation, community. Community means being one together. Forget the sacred victim, we'll get to him in a moment, but the sacred victim is the solution to this, as we'll see. Once again, thanks to my nephew. Eventually, all this violence is going to streamline against a single victim. And if all the violence of all is now directed against that single victim, you have real cooperation, collaboration, laboring together to kill this victim. And when the victim is killed, you have peace. And here again, it's a circle with a center. The central foundation, sacrificial victim, is revealed as a god because we had all this violence, and when we killed the victim, we're at peace. And so sacrificers revere the victim as a god. They revere the god whom they immolate as a victim. And this is sacrificial culture. The difference between pagan culture, archaic culture, and Judeo-Christian culture is that we don't buy the fact that the victim is the cause of all the violence, you see. We don't accept the idea that the victim is the cause of this violence. We have to look into ourselves. And there's a line from scriptures which I'll get to, which will clarify that further. But the point is, the prophets, the Psalms, the Gospels tell us that the victim of the crowd, of the lynching, is not guilty of anything, and that it's the crowd mimesis that says, crucify him, which, by the way, a week before said, hail, son of David. You see, it's the mobility, mobs, and mobility of the same word of crowds, which eventually streamline towards the victim, which give a culture momentary experience of calm, of cohesion. If we think of Jim Crow in this country, that's what all that was about, among other things. You can take this circle in various places in different ways. For instance, very schema. Keep in mind that there ought to be cross sections through the center, but I couldn't get my arrows to do the color for me. This is a model of any human institution. To be very quick and schematic about it. For instance, think of the Middle Ages. Go to Europe. You can't not think of the Middle Ages, at least if you go to France, right? Because in the center of every town, you see the church. And what is the job of the church? The church's job is to mediate the relationships of all the people in the community on the periphery. At the center of every French town, there's a church. Its job is to mediate their relationships and also among themselves and also their relationships to God. That's why we have bishops and popes and things like that. Change to modern society, civil society. It is not the church, it is not God which mediates relationships. It is law, and law mediates our relationships, and therefore is the mediator of our relationship to rights. Okay? I'm going very fast, but I'm saying that this schema is very elastic. Today, think of finance capitalism, a market-driven society, in which banks mediate the relationships of the citizens on the periphery, their relationship to money. Okay? And so that all these centers mediate between subjects, and they always mediate somewhat, sooner or later, at the expense or exclusion of some others. In higher education, we sacrifice student interest to our own career, we sacrifice colleagues to our own prestige. I'm a Roman Catholic, so I know all about how a hierarchy will sacrifice victims of abuse in order to circle its wagons around a certain reputation. You all can think of an institution in which you participate, which in order to perpetuate and increase its existence, expels certain elements. And that's the image I'm giving you there. S plus S prime, these are all of us around any institution. And then you have S minus, the broken, or the bad S, or the failed S. This could be the poor, this could be the immigrants, this could be criminals, etc. Well, we have that, excuse me, there's something missing in this slide, but often, you can make it, there's a broken circle, which represents a bad S, a victim, a scapegoat. And it's often against this expulsion that we identify our identity. We have a place for bad guys, which makes us the good guys. Next slide. This is very visibly illustrated in a very famous story. And it's a true story. Even if it never happened, it's a truth story. The woman could take it in adultery. And by the way, the gospel is very explicit. It's the woman taken. It's not that she was in adultery, but she was caught at it. She was caught at it. And there's an effort of the Sanhedrin, of the cultural leaders, to trap Jesus and say the law says this person must be stoned, and you have Western art representing two very important moments in this story. Jesus bending over to write on the sand. What's that about? We don't know what he writes. It doesn't matter. Because if he's bending over, maybe he's bending over to pick up a rock to start the stoning. Throwing the first stone is the hardest thing you can do, because everybody else will just follow you. But you have to kickstart this operation. And so you have Grego, the younger, emphasizing the role of handwork here, and it's even more emphatic half a century later with Lutto, where you see Jesus surrounded by all these people, saying the law and the woman, etc. It's all about blaming. And Jesus, of course, we know, says that anyone who is without sin cast the first stone.